Gotcha.
Hey, how's it going everybody? It's TheGameconomist back with another Dark Souls 3 PvP guide. Today I'm taking another look at the Lothric Knight Longspear. Alright, so Lothric Knight Longspear is part of a very small weapon class that we call the Pikes. There's only 3 of them in there. You've got the Great Lance, which I love the Great Lance as well, by the way. You have this one, the Lothric Knight Longspear, and then you actually have a weapon called the Pike. And the Pike is like a direct downgrade to the Lothric Knight Longspear. There's no reason to use it, and I just won't be making a video on it because it has shorter range, and the Lothric Knight Longspear also has a passive benefit where you gain poise just for having it, in one of your hands. So you might as well just use the Lothric Knight Longspear. This weapon can be buffed and infused, and we're going to be doing a refined build with it. That's what I normally use, and I don't think there's a good reason to use a dark build on it. If you're going to have trouble with somebody who's using a shield, I recommend just bringing a deep Lothric longsword or a man serpent hatchet would work as well. And you can use that in your offhand with this weapon, but we want to have this be refined because we're going to be using the Leo ring with it for very high counter damage. The AR on this weapon is not bad at all. I was reaching 427 when I was dual wielding it. I noticed the scaling in both strength and dexterity seemed pretty good. I was getting 3s and even 4s for every point that I put into them, all the way up to 40. So I took it to 40-40. I did test for like strength builds as well as dexterity builds. Refined seems to be the way to go. For the armor, I am playing as a Lothric Knight. You might do something else, something that maybe it doesn't weigh as much, and that would allow you to have your, maybe like a Black Knight shield in your offhand at all times. Probably a crossbow, actually. Crossbow or a deep Lothric Knight longsword. One of those is probably more important. Maybe you could argue the Dragon Head shield as well. And then what I would have as well is the Filianor Chime for Tears of Denial, like usual. And I always bring a Blessed Cestus. Alright, well let's talk a little bit about how this weapon performed in duels. So, what I did like about the weapon is that it would counter hit for staggering amounts of damage, usually around 500 to 600 damage. And then if you get a fully charged R2 and it's a counter hit, you can hit up to 700 damage in one move. It's ridiculous how much it does. Alright, and that's probably the positive note on this weapon. It does have a lot of range. You can outrange it, you can outspace a lot of opponents. And that's kind of where it stops. You can use the charge also. The weapon art charge is just like charge on any other weapon. If you predict your opponent correctly, you can poise into them using the charge. You don't want to use it from far away. If you use it from far away, your opponent gets plenty of time to react, and they can either try to roll behind you or they can easily parry that move. So it's best to use it into an opponent who you've predicted, right? And I like to use it in close range because they never expect that. And that's the best time to use the charge weapon art. It's a very limited, use weapon. So again, that's kind of where the fun ends. The troubles that this weapon has is that first of all, the moveset is too slow, right? I think as I become better and better at dueling, I realize just how important it is to have some combination of speed, damage, reach, and poise. And this weapon is kind of a slow weapon, but it also doesn't have a lot of poise. It doesn't have any hyper armor moves other than the weapon art. And again, the weapon art is very limited use. At the same time, it doesn't have a really strong pressuring game because the running attack uses all your stamina. It's not a terrible move either. I want to say it's not my favorite move just because it's that running attack, right? A literal running attack. Your character starts to run forward and he grabs anyone who's in front of him, but it doesn't have a lot of tracking in that move, right? So if your opponent just strafes correctly or they roll, they're going to get away from it, and then you're missing half of your stamina bar. It's ridiculous how much it costs to use. So it's great for chasing opponents down who are rolling directly backwards, but if your opponent recognizes the weapon, they're going to be looking out for that move, the running attack specifically. So I didn't like the running attack. Oh, there is another nice thing I forgot to mention. The R2 has pretty good tracking, which is nice on a any spear type weapon, and again, this is a pike. But it's nice to have something like that, because in general the tracking's not that good. If you use the regular R1, the tracking's not that good. Your opponent can just kind of strafe to the left or the right, and it's going to miss. right? So, and I even tried free aiming that. You know, when I played S-Stock for a long time, I started unlocking and playing free aimed, and I would occasionally surprise opponents who were just trying to outstrafe me. But I feel like in a really try hard duel, your opponent will eventually learn that they can't strafe because you're free aiming, and they'll just get back to reactively rolling, which maybe that's harder, maybe not. I can tell you that free aiming the weapon is not easy to do all the time. It really messes with your level of concentration. I was surprised to not find myself having too much trouble with the Black Knight shield. If you just bring that offhand deep infused weapon or whatever chip weapon you have in your offhand, you really can just spam somebody who's trying to get too close to you, and that helps a lot. And yeah, I thought that I would have to go with a dark build on the Lothric Knight Spear in order to kind of counter those Black Knight shields, but hey, you know, being able to trade into an R1 from an opponent who thinks they can R1 into you, you get that extra bonus damage from the Leo Ring, right? And the deep sword in your offhand actually worked pretty well. So yeah, I might have to take another look at the Great Lance and consider doing a Leo Ring build on the Great Lance as well, because I'm wondering, now that I've done this, I'm wondering if maybe it would be, you know, it would have been better as a counter hit weapon rather than as a dark weapon. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. You really do have to fight somebody who knows what they're doing with the Black Knight shield in order to get a better understanding, because the deep weapon isn't going to be as good, you know, the deep sword in your offhand isn't going to be as good as a dark weapon with the dark build. And at the same time, if you're strictly relying on your offhand, he knows he can play around in the range of that spear. So overall, I found this weapon to be dealing competent damage, and I found it to have a pretty good ranged game. However, it really does fall behind when it comes to being able to pressure because the running attack is too expensive to use. The tracking is still pretty bad on this weapon unless you're using the R2, which is too slow. You know, your opponent has plenty of time to react to the R2. What I like to do is, if they're really close to me, I like to start charging it, and then they will either, I'll try to catch them on their panic roll or on their, they're trying to guess when I'm going to release it, and sometimes I'll release it early, I'll release it late, but that doesn't always work, so you just kind of have to get lucky almost. You have to predict your opponent. So again, the R2 is kind of slow, and then the charge weapon art is the typical charge weapon art. This weapon is definitely mid-tier to lower mid-tier because of the slow movement speed of the weapon and the weak running attack. Alright, well, I finally re-examined that weapon. What do you guys want me to do next? Let me know, and I will see you next time.